Should be, yeah? Okay. All right, that should stay. Okay, so good Shabbos, everyone. We don't have a Torah portion today because it's what you call Chol HaMoed Sukkot. We're in the intermediate days of Sukkot, and there's a special Torah reading about Sukkot for the Shabbat. So there's no official Torah portion, and the Torah reading is a section from Sukkot, but I don't really want to deal with what we're reading in Torah. I want to deal specifically with the section of Torah that talks about sukkahs and the building of sukkahs. And really, we'll probably only need a few verses. But I want to look today in Leviticus 23, verse 39. Leviticus 23, verse 39. If anyone finds it in Plout, let me know. 930. 303 if you're using the Saperstein, which is just me. Leviticus 23, verse 39. Okay? All right, good to see you all. Okay, everybody have it? Okay, so here we go, Norman. Oh, by the way, before we begin, 2 announcements. You know, before I started working here, after I was hired but still had to work 6 months more for people who now hated me, which was awesome. I had gotten a couple of letters from members of the congregation. One was from Steve Simon, telling me all about how great this class was, how great the Torah Study class was. And I said, well, it can't be anything better than what I get in Fort Myers. Fort Myers, I can get sometimes up to 10 people. Yeah. Which for the room we had made it seem like was pretty good. The other letter was from Bob Price, who passed away this week, and who was here almost every week until he couldn't be here anymore. And Bob said, listen, I thought the letter at the time was chutzpahdik. I'm like, because he was writing me to tell me how this class is conducted, and you need to conduct it that way, and this is how we do it. And I said, well, you'll see. No, but I remember the one thing that he wrote in the letter. I have to look and see if I still have the letter. I might. But he told me that Norman reads first. So, I said, I can live with it. I could live with it. But he went out of his way to tell me how special this group was, and seeing him, I saw him at hospice and got to say goodbye to him, and it was a tough thing, and his memory should be for a blessing, and our study today should lift his soul in heaven. The other announcement is a bit more mundane, although important. There's a question about the Torah commentary books, the new ones that we're collecting money for. So the Plout is going out of business. The Reform movement, the CCAR is coming up with a new one for a new generation. It's an 8-year project. I think we're already in year 3 or 4. There was an original think tank of rabbis to come up with the idea to put it together, and some canners, and a whole bunch of scholars, and not just scholars from the Reform movement, the greatest biblical scholars in the world, from Israel, from Vanderbilt, from really serious scholars, And they decided to put this thing together. And the total cost of everything, and it's hard to believe this is how much it costs, but the total cost of everything to do it is $8 million. And so one of the ways that they're doing it is asking congregations to support it. So I immediately stood up and said, well, Torah study is as important to Temple Beth Am as it's got to be to any synagogue, any Reformed congregation on the planet. We will somehow find the money. So, most congregations are giving gifts of $5,000, $10,000, $20,000. But most congregations are about 100 families, 200 families, 300 families. So we said, Temple Beth Am will pledge $100,000. So last year, we announced that at the High Holy Days, and last year we raised about $35,000. Announced it again this year. Since Rosh Hashanah to today, we've raised another 52. So we're at 87. 13,000 more to give, or to collect, to raise. But I don't want anyone to think, as often as maybe I malign or people malign the Plout because it doesn't have Rashi, it doesn't have a lot of things. This new book is going to be really special. Not only is it going to be a book, but it's going to be a website. So in other words, you could scan the code. You could scan a code in the book, and it'll take you to our Torah portion. And as scholars continue to add articles to that, so if I wrote an article or some professor wrote an article on this week's Torah portion, it'll continue to be added. It'll be like a living, breathing thing. And it'll go as a companion to the book. Now, you could do different things. You could purchase a Torah portion. You could purchase a Haftorah. For example, there are a bunch of rabbis named Rachel. There are like 20 rabbis named Rachel. They purchased a Torah portion that mentions the story of Rachel. Temple Beth Am, we got the entire book of Exodus. The entire book of Exodus for Beth Am. So when you go, every book in the world, when you open it to Exodus, you'll see Beth Am's logo. You'll see, blurb. They had this incredible whatever. Whatever. No, but we'll have Exodus. So I didn't want anyone to think that I'm not in heavy support of this thing, or that's why I'm raising the money for it. It's a very scholarly work. It's going to be a great addition to our movement and take us into a new generation. It's got a lot of cool stuff. In fact, we've been chosen as one of the congregations to pilot it. So we're going to start bringing a few Torah portions of it to use, and then send our feedback to the committee. You all have a chance to offer feedback from it. 13,000, thank you. Okay, so sold. Yeah. Thank you. They'll bill you. Don't worry. But, I'm sorry, just kidding. Well, yeah, you could you could keep it, but probably most synagogues will either put them in a room where they put all the other stuff they don't want. We have a few of those, or bury them, which is when I was in Fort Myers, we buried the old prayer books. We buried the Gates of Prayers because we got the new ones. Because you're not allowed to throw them out. The only way to properly dispose of them is to bury them. And there's a whole ceremony that we do. It's really fascinating, actually. So, but I'm not sure. I don't think we don't have so many that we need to throw them out. Maybe we'll give them away as gifts.
How much for a sixth book?
Another 100. So.
I have an autographed copy of Plout book here.
Oh, wow.
It'll become worth more than.
Yeah, hang on to that one. Yeah, hang on to that one. So, although in the case of my book, if you could find one that's not autographed, that's a lot more valuable. So pretty cool. All right. So those are all the announcements. Chapter 23, verse 39. Here we go. Leviticus.
Mark, on the 50th day of the 7th month, when you have gathered in the yield of your land, you shall observe the festival of the Eternal.
Okay. So we're talking about Sukkot, obviously. And the first thing we've said about it is, if we're reading a biography of Sukkot, if we're reading what is the one thing we know about it? So besides the date, what's one thing we know about the characteristic of the holiday? Just from what we've read so far. Okay, so it's a week long. What's the other thing? It's a harvest festival. It has to be done when the fall harvest comes in. Now, the first thing you should say when you think about Sukkot is, shouldn't this be in the spring? Because Passover happened in the spring, and after Passover they left Egypt and they went out into the wilderness and they started dwelling in booths. So why isn't Sukkot 5 days after Pesach in the spring? Why is it 5 days after Yom Kippur in the fall? Well, one thing is it has to be in the harvest. Now, there's also a harvest in the spring, but that's already marked by Pesach. And since they have to have a different harvest, it had to be moved somewhere else. Now, that being said, there's also a connection, specific connection between Sukkot and Yom Kippur. So there's another reason that it had to be closer to Yom Kippur, but we haven't gotten there yet. We'll get to that later. But the first thing we can say so far from verse 39, besides the fact that it's a 7-day period, or 8 days if you live in the diaspora, that it's a harvest holiday. Okay, keep going.
And a complete test on the 8th day. On the first day, you shall take the crown of Hagar trees.
Okay, sorry. What does it mean, a complete day of rest? When the Torah says a complete day of rest, and it's not talking about Shabbat, what does it mean? It means that all of the Shabbat regulations hold. Not on the intermediate days. Not on today, except today's Shabbat. Not on yesterday, well, until sundown. Not on Thursday. But on the first day and the last day, same thing. You can't use electricity, all that stuff. There are a few significant differences. But for the most part, when the Torah says complete rest, it means you have to follow the Shabbat rules for the day. Okay. Now, verse 40, we're going to get into the lulav and the etrog.
Branches of palm trees, boughs of leafy trees, and willows of the brook. And you shall rejoice before the eternal God 7 days. You shall observe it as a festival of the eternal for 7 days of the year. You shall observe it in the 7th month as a law for all time throughout the ages. You shall live in booths 7 days. All citizens of Israel shall live in booths.
Okay, so from verse 40 to verse 42, there's a major problem for the Jews who are being commanded this for the first time in the wilderness. So say you're at one of Moses' lessons, and he said, okay, here's how Sukkot's going to go. We're going to build the huts. One night we'll have pizza because of the joke. All right, pizza in the hut. No, you never worked at a shul. All right. And then you have to have these 4 species that you're going to schlep around and you'll wave them and shake them. What's the problem?
We're in the desert.
Where do you get them?
So, right. So if you're in the wilderness and Moses is telling you, okay, it's Sukkot, go get your lulavs and your etrogs, a good question would be, huh? What are you talking about? Right, it was before Amazon, before Janice Baseman ordered them for the shul. So, what is Moses really saying to the Jews here? Exactly. I'm telling you how Sukkot is going to be in the future. Now, here's the weird part. They build the sukkahs, which they do need in the wilderness, but won't need in Israel. Because they'll have houses in Israel. They have no houses in the wilderness. So they build the sukkahs that they do need in the wilderness, but won't need to when they get to Israel. And they don't do the lulav and the etrog that they might need, but they can't get, but will be able to get when they get to the land of Israel. And so we have to ask the question, what is the connection between Sukkot, the wilderness, and the land of Israel? Because you can't do it all. Or seemingly, you might say, I can't do the lulav and the etrog in the wilderness, And I don't need to do the sukkah when I get to the land of Israel. So what's going on here? All right. I didn't give any answers yet. I'm just pointing out the questions so far.
Well, it's a harvest thing. So the harvest occurs in the fields. So they all have to move from the cities or the towns to harvest. So they spend the week in the wilderness.
I mean, look, a lot of people, once Joshua separated the tribes, they weren't all urban. You know, I mean, a lot of them were farmers and, whatever. But there's a connection. There's definitely a connection of going from your sturdy home into a more agricultural setting. That's it.
I think that first of all, you need something to look forward to. You build a sukkah because you need it right now.
Okay.
These promises of how it will be give you some animation, some vigor to get there.
Okay.
And once you're there, even though you don't need it, you need to know where you came from.
Uh-huh. Okay.
You need to understand your history.
Very good. Very good.
You can't lose that. And this is one of the ways, since it's done perpetually,
Okay.
that we perpetually remember our history.
Okay, and that's the question that the rabbis ask that I want to get to in a second. So let's keep going. I did prepare a few things. So if you look at verse, Norm, is that microphone on? I'm getting texts that they, yeah, I don't know why they can't hear you. All right, 40, where do we get to? 41, 42? Okay, so let's read 42.
You shall live in booths 7 days. All citizens in Israel shall live in booths, in order that future generations may know that I made the Israelite people live in booths when I brought them out of the land of Egypt.
Right, and that's what Stuart just said. Verse 42, you'll live in booths. 43, because God is saying, I want you to remember what happened. Okay. Now, okay, and that's it. But one other question you could ask is, if you read, I just want to read 43 carefully again and then ask one more question. So that your generations will know that I caused the children of Israel to dwell in booths when I took them from the land of Egypt. I'm the Lord your God. So the question is, who built the booths? Did you always understand that God provided the booths, or did you always think that the people built the booths on their own? Built them on their own? Okay. Now, you're in the middle of nowhere. Where do you get the materials? Now, you could answer that because they brought a lot of materials with them out of Egypt. After all, they built the whole tabernacle. So, okay, so maybe they had stuff to build. But the tabernacle was one tabernacle of stuff that they built to build one tabernacle. This is 1.2 million people. That's a lot of sukkahs. That's a lot of stuff you have to schlep to house 1.2 million people.
A lot of palm fronds.
Yeah.
You know, I think there are things in the desert, and more than difficult, the process of doing this also means something.
Right.
The difficulty that they face, kind of embeds, during that process, it's a maturing in a way, an acknowledgement of the difficulty and an acknowledgement that they're doing something that God has asked them to do.
Okay.
So I think that they built them.
Yeah. I mean, the only reason the rabbis asked the question is because of one Hebrew word, hoshavti. And they're asking the question, what does that mean? Which says, hoshavti comes from the word lashevet, to sit, like yeshiva. Yeshiva is a place of sitting where you sit and study Torah all day. Hoshavti means I caused them to dwell. It also means to dwell. I caused them to dwell. Right? We say leshev basukah. That's the blessing. This is the same root. So it doesn't really matter. Which means, did he build it? Now, the rabbis asked the question on a much different level. But let me just manipulate the question a little bit, because what they're really asking is, who cares? of all the things, there were a lot of miracles that God did for the Jewish people in Egypt. One of them was he made sure their clothes never got dirty. Can you imagine schlepping through the wilderness for 40 years in the same outfit? We have families that can't go through the same bar mitzvah party with just one outfit. They have an outfit for the service, they have an outfit for the hors d'oeuvres, they have an outfit for the dancing, they have $150,000 just on the outfits. So these Jews wore the same outfit for 40 years, and they never got dirty. And there were lots of other miracles that happened. So the question is, there must have been something really special about the sukkahs and the way that the Israelites related to them that God said, I need you to remember these forever. So two rabbis, Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Akiva, have a very famous debate. This is one of the most famous lines in the whole Talmud, which means that most Jews have never heard of it, but it's one of the most famous lines in the Talmud. Okay, so if you look at Bavli Sukkah 11b, the top of the page, if you ever went to yeshiva, I would expect you to know this. Okay. Ed, would you mind reading the first Talmud there?
As it is taught in the Baraita that the verse states, I made the children of Israel to reside in Sukkot. These booths were clouds of glory. This is the statement of Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Akiva says they established for themselves actual Sukkot.
Okay, so the debate between the rabbis is, one rabbi, Rabbi Eliezer, says there were no sukkahs. There were clouds of glory, which means that God covered the Jewish people with these magical clouds that did all kinds of wonders. So for example, if another nation would attack the Israelites, the clouds would absorb their weapons before they could hit they provided cover, they provided everything that you would need, okay, whatever that means. And that there were no actual sukkahs, there were clouds. So when we build a sukkah, the purpose of building a sukkah is to remember that miracle that God did for us, which also is meant to show us that our real shelter in life is God. Okay. That's Rabbi Eliezer. You can take it or leave it, but that's what he thinks. Rabbi Akiva says, let's just hold the questions for a little bit, okay? Because we have a lot more to get through in only a certain amount of time. Rabbi Akiva says, no. You serious? Go ahead.
Clouds of glory had departed for a while. Now they came back.
Okay. Very good. Rabbi Akiva says, Sukkot Mamash. They actually build sukkahs. Okay. No, they actually went and built. What's the difference between the two? Now, there are a lot of differences. You could teach a whole class just on what do they mean by these two differences. But the main difference is this. If it was God protecting them, if it was just the clouds, then what we're saying is God watches over us and he protects us, and all our shelter in life really comes from God, and we just get it. It just comes. On the other hand, if you're Rabbi Akiva said, no, you have to go out and build the sukkah, means that if you don't participate, if you don't actually meet God halfway, if you're not getting your hands dirty and doing it yourself, then nothing happens. Judaism, in a lot of ways, is not a religion of faith. It's a religion of action. I mean, there's faith too, but there's a lot of action. There's a lot of stuff you have to do. And a lot of times we say, yeah, why should I bother doing that? Does it really matter? Does it really matter if I do this? Does it really matter if I do that? And, to God, it probably doesn't. But it's supposed to matter to you. The fact of building the sukkah, I mean, I'm the least, if you saw my sukkah in my backyard, it is the worst, it's the most pathetic excuse for a sukkah. But given the level of handiness that God gave me as a gift, it's pretty good. Okay, so much for the no questions. Yes?
I'd rather go with a cloud of... Okay, I could go with the mic. Hold on. Probably knew who was talking. rather go with the cloud. If you were taking, you had 1 million people, say 4 people to a family, you're schlepping around 250 sukkahs for 40 years. It's a lot of palm fronds. I'd rather go with the cloud.
Okay, fair enough. Can you pass the mic back? It's
I
just
think you
Mark.
can merge the 2 points of
We're
view
trying,
of the
Mark.
2 rabbis. The miracle of the cloud.
yes.
And then the actual building of the sukkah, because there was the miracle of providing the materials, and then the people built the sukkahs. It's a merging of the 2 that I think is reality.
Yeah, I think ultimately a lot of sermons go in that direction. How do you? Okay, so let's look at the Rashbam, the grandson of Rashi. Here's what he has to say. Genya, would you mind reading where it says the plain meaning of the verse?
The plain meaning of the verse follows the opinions expressed in Tractate Sukkot, that the word booth here should be understood literally. This is the idea behind the text in Deuteronomy 16:13. You shall hold the feast of booths after the ingathering from your threshing floor and your vat. In other words, when you gather the produce of your land and your houses are full of all good things, grain, wine, and oil, so that you will remember that I made the Israelites live in booths for 40 years in the wilderness without any settlement and without owning any land. As a result of contemplating this, you will give thanks to the one who allows you to own your own land and your houses, which are filled with all good things. And do not say to yourselves, my own power and the might of my hand have won this wealth for me.
Okay, so when you get to the land of Israel, this will become a harvest holiday. Right now, there's no harvest because you're in the wilderness, but I'm telling you, someday you're going to get to the land of Israel, and the holiday is going to be different than you see here. It's going to be a harvest holiday. And so you might say to yourself, if it's a harvest holiday, boy, that's when I'm making the most money. That's when I have the most fruit to sell and vegetables to sell in the market. I've got plenty to eat. I'm doing great. The land is taking care of me. So now, the last thing in the world I need in the harvest time is a sukkah. Right? So God reminds you, go out into the sukkah, because just like the Israelites had no food or anything in the wilderness and I took care of them, don't think the food that you have now here in the land of Israel is because of you. You know, when we say the motzi isn't thanking the bread for coming out of the land. It's thanking the force that causes the bread to come out of the land, right? Which is God. And so what he's saying is, the food that you have now in the land of Israel is no different than the lack of food they had in the wilderness. I provided manna for them. For you, you have figs and pomegranates and so forth. But the sukkah is meant to remind you of that. Because if you leave your home, at the time when you're feeling the most content, the richest, the strongest, and precisely, dafka, at that time, you go out into the sukkah and you're reminded, wow, my real shelter comes from God. So I think we knew that already, but my point of bringing that up here is to make a comparison of Sukkot from the wilderness holiday to a land of Israel holiday, specifically what Sukkot means to the land of Israel. Okay, do you see that so far? Okay, now the next thing that goes along with the sukkah and the land of Israel, and things that you need in the land of Israel but you can't get in the wilderness, are the 4 species, the daled minim, the lulav, and the etrog. So you have the lulav that is shaped like the spine, the willows shaped like the eyes, the myrtle shaped like the mouth, and the etrog that are shaped like the heart. Okay? Right, yeah, now, okay, so a little bit, excuse me, a little bit on the 4 species from Maimonides. So if you look at the next source, Rambam, this is from his philosophical treatise, The Guide for the Perplexed, Moreh Nevuchim. Annabelle, would you mind reading the Rambam?
I believe that the 4 species are a symbolical expression of our rejoicing that the Israelites changed the wilderness. No place of seed, or of figs, or of vines, or of pomegranates, or of water to drink. Numbers 25. With a country full of fruit trees and rivers. In order to remember this, we take the fruit, which is the most pleasant of the fruit of the land, branches which smell the best, most beautiful leaves, and also the best of herbs, i.e., the willows of the brook. These 4 kinds have also those 3 purposes. First, they were plentiful in those days in Israel, so that everyone could easily get them.
Right, so just in case you ever ask, what is it a coincidence that the myrtles are shaped like mouths and willows shaped like eyes? And is that a later midrash that said, hey, wow, look at this? The first thing that Maimonides says is the reason we have those 4 species, you could find them. You could get them, and everyone needed them. So they were all over the place. I remember, if you see something that you don't normally see, if you ever have a friend come from the north and stay with you, and they see one of these massive iguanas, walking through your front yard, they think they're in Jurassic Park, and we're just like, that's Tuesday, that's Sammy, he lives here, but
For Jews, it is Jurassic.
yeah, but this was what was around. So let's use those. Okay, that's the first reason. Secondly,
They have a good appearance. They're green. Some of them, the citron and the myrtle, are also excellent as regards their smell. The branches of the palm tree and the willow having neither good nor bad smell.
right, and they're meant to represent different types of Jews, right? There's the etrog is the Jew who studies Torah and does good deeds. The one that smells good but doesn't taste good is, does good deeds but doesn't study Torah. There's 4 kinds of combinations you could make, and that's what they represent. Okay,
Thirdly, they keep fresh and green for 7 days, which is not the case with peaches, pomegranates, asparagus, nuts, and the like.
Right, so the rabbis got around, there was a meeting, and they said, we need a fruit that's kind of round that everyone can get. And one rabbi said, I think we should go with the peach. Another rabbi said, peaches. 3-4 days max. This is a 7-day holiday. You crazy? I got an idea. How about a citron? I like it. And there you have it. That's how the etrog became the citron. Could have been a peach. So if we're in Georgia, it would have been, but it wasn't. So, question? No? Okay. All right. Some of this is meant to be fun. All right, let's keep going. All right. So, but Maimonides is telling you that the purpose of the lulav and the etrog was practicality. It's what we have around. It's what's going to last. And the rabbis are going to be able to write great midrashim because some of them smell and some of them don't. Some of them taste good and some of them don't, etc. Okay. Now, does anyone know what the end of Sukkot is a little ambiguous to us. We're not sure. What is it? Is it Simchat Torah? Is it Shmini Atzeret? Is it Hoshana Rabbah? It's like, what is it? Has anyone ever heard of Hoshana Rabbah? No. Okay. Has anyone heard of Hoshana, that term, Hoshana? Anyone know what it is? Okay. Yeah. A Hoshana is that during the first 6 days of Sukkot, when you have your daily prayers, if you would go to a morning shacharit service and everyone would have their lulav in the etrog, you shake it every day during Sukkot except for Shabbat in the morning. And so you go and right either before or after Hallel, usually after Hallel, everybody would walk around the bima one time holding their lulav and etrog. one time. That's called a Hoshana. And there are different like liturgical poems that go with each day's Hoshana. But on the last day, on Sukkot, you would do it 7 times. So it's kind of a weird thing. We ask the question, why? What is that? So I just want to show you. If you look there's a Mishnah now about it. On the back of the page, Mishnah 4:5 in Sukkah. We're up to Joe. Would you mind reading that Mishnah? Each day.
Mishnah Sukkah 4:5. Each day they would circle the altar one time and say, Lord, please save us. Lord, please grant us success. Rabbi Yehuda says they would say, Ani vaho, please save us. And on that day, the 7th day of Sukkot, they would circle the altar 7 times.
Right, Ani vaho. He was one of the Hawaiian rabbis who said that. Eventually got changed to aloha. I don't know. Or mahalo. Now, why we go around the bima today is because on Sukkot, they used to walk around the altar once a day with their lulav and the etrog, and then on the last day of Sukkot, they would walk around it 7 times. So when we walk around the bima, it's recreating that moment when they walked around the altar in the Holy Temple. Clear so far? We didn't say why. We're just saying the Mishnah, by the way, that's how Mishnah works. Mishnah tells you something. It says, okay, this is what we used to do. And then you'd ask the question, huh? Why? Well, then you have 9 pages of Gemara of the rabbis arguing why. Well, that's Talmud. But the Mishnah just says, boom, here's what they used to do. And sometimes it'll give you a little more information, but usually not. And so if you read that, you're supposed to then ask the question, yeah, but why did they walk around the altar? And why one time all the first 6 days and 7 days on the last day? That's the question you're supposed to ask. Okay, now there's a hint here. Let's not go to the hint yet. Now, you see what they say here. Lord, please save us. Lord, please grant us success. You might be familiar with that in Hebrew because it's part of the Hallel. It sounds like, Anana Hoshiana, Anana Hoshiana, Anana Yatzlichana, Anana Yatzlichana. Does that sound familiar? It's part of the Hallel. Most of the Hallel comes from the Psalms. This is one of those excerpts from the Psalms. And as they would walk around, they would say, please God save us, please God grant us success. So now that gives us a little bit of a hint. Why did they walk around the altar on Sukkot? Because they wanted to be saved from something, and they wanted to be successful in something. Now my question is this: what did they want to be successful in? And if you can answer that question, then you can answer the question, why does Sukkot have to be right after Yom Kippur? Because remember how we started, Sukkot is supposed to be in terms of the narrative of the Torah, Sukkot is supposed to be in the spring, because it happens after Pesach. But it's connected to Yom Kippur, and it has to be here. Why? Okay, to get that answer, there's a midrash. So if you look at Leviticus Rabbah 30, so Shelley, you get this one, and then the next source will be for Bill to read.
Thank God.
I didn't feel like taking the time to translate it, so I just brought it and I'll read it to you. But I'll translate it. All right.
Rabbi Evan said, this is analogous to 2 litigants who came before a judge, and we do not know who prevailed. But if one comes and takes palm branches in his hand, we know that he is the one who prevailed. So Israel and the nations of the world litigate before the Holy One, blessed be he, on Rosh Hashanah, and we do not know who prevailed. But when Israel emerges before the Holy One, blessed be he, with their palm branches and their citrons in their hands, we know that it is Israel that emerged victorious. Therefore, Moses exhorts Israel and says to them, you shall take for you on the first day.
Okay, now I'm going to try to make Sukkot make a lot more sense than it's maybe ever made for you. And I think we did this once, so this might sound familiar, but it bears repeating. I don't know if we did this or not. But I recently, I don't know, maybe 3 years ago, I did I read studied all of Sukkah, the tractate in the Talmud, and I learned all about this. And one of the things was, if you went to a court case and you had two litigants, how would anyone outside know who won? They didn't post it. There was no herald. There were no phones. How would it become public who won the case? Whatever disagreement they had, this is my cow, that's your sheep, whatever. How do we know who gets it? So the court would give a symbol to the winner. And that symbol was a palm branch. If you walked out with the palm branch, that means you were judged that you won the case. So, Sukkot comes 5 days after Yom Kippur. On Yom Kippur, each one of us is on trial. If you don't carry a lulav for Sukkot, then the trial that you won is null and void. If you don't do Sukkot, it's like, you wasted the trial. You paid the lawyer, and you won, and you still lose. Or you're still not going to get the damages. So the carrying the lulav is the sign. That's why Sukkot has to be after Yom Kippur. Because going into the sukkah with the lulav and etrog is your sign that God has forgiven you. And what's the sign that God's forgiven you? You take your lulav, which shows you won the trial. You go into the sukkah where God promises he's going to protect you. That's Sukkot. Pretty cool, right? Okay. All right. Now, there's a source here. I don't often study the Jerusalem Talmud. We study the Babylonian Talmud. Jerusalem Talmud's kind of tricky and convoluted, and it doesn't record the arguments. It only tells you the laws. So it's important to know, but not a lot of people study it. The Or Yesharim is a commentary on that Jerusalem Talmud, and I didn't feel like translating this whole thing, so I thought I'd just print it and then read it. So here's what he says, talking about Sukkot. But before we do that, if you look back to the top, Mishnah Sukkah 4:5, there's Rebbe Aha. You know what his name in Greek was? No? In Greek. Rabbi Eureka. Guys, I'll be here all week. All right. I've used that joke before to better success. So look what he says. On that day, they surrounded the altar 7 times. So what we say is on the first 6 days, we walk around the altar, or the priest used to walk around the altar with the lulav and the etrog, and so that's what we do. We walk around the bima. On the 7th day, we walk around 7 times. And Rabbi Aha says, you know why we do that? Because it has to do with Jericho, Yericho. What does that have to do with Jericho? Okay. Now, what 2 cities can you think of that are nicknamed the City of Palms? Jericho and Fort Myers. Fort Myers, City of Palms. So,
which has a lower out.
yeah. So I once had I had a member who wanted to grow a royal palm in his backyard. And the city said he couldn't do it for whatever reason. Royal palms are these things, they grow so fast and get so big. And he went to court. He said, we're the city of palms. Didn't work. All right. So here's what it says. Kitsaru b'nei Yisrael. So this is a medieval commentary on the Jerusalem Talmud. And it says, Kitsaru b'nei Yisrael Yericho. When the children of Israel came to Yericho. Now, when did they come to Yericho? This was the first city they conquered when they entered the land of Israel. This is the beginning of the conquering of the land of Israel. Okay? Anshei milchama hekifu et ha'ir. The Jewish soldiers surrounded the city. Pam achat b'chol yom b'shishat yamim. They circled the city once a day for 6 days. So already you see where we're going, right? And that's why Rabbi Aha says what we do around the altar and what Jews to this day still do around the bima is a recreation of what the Jews did when they got to Jericho. Okay. Uveshiva, And on the seventh day, Kohanim alchu barosh hatalucha, priests went at the head of this process, hamakifa et ha'ir, that surrounded the city, v'taku b'shofar, and they blew shofars. V'achrei malach Aaron Brit Hashem, and the rest of them went with the Ark of the Covenant, whatever they had. Uvayom hashvi'i, but on the seventh day, hekifu et ha'ir sheva pamim. On the seventh day, they circled the city 7 times. V'akonim taku b'shofar b'chol hakafa mesaviv la'ir. And the priests blew the shofars each time they went around the city of Jericho. Uvapam hashvi'it, because remember, there was no war. They blew the shofars and the walls came tumbling down. Right? There was no war. God fought the war for them. All they did was blow the shofars. The walls came tumbling down. Okay, so that's what's happening. Uvapam hashvi'it, and on the 7th time, nafla chomat ha'ir. The wall of the city fell. Tachteha, underneath. V'kavshu et ha'ir. And they conquered the city, and that's from Joshua chapter 6. Hahakafot saviv hamizbeach b'shivat yimei chag haSukkot hem zachar lachach. The hakafot, we say hakafas when we walk around with the Torah. So the walking around the altar on the 7th day of Sukkot are memory of this. Sheken b'chol yom makifim et hamizbeach pam achat. Because for each of the first 6 days of Sukkot, we walk around the altar once. Va'kohanim tokim b'chot tzotzrot, and the priests, when they walked around the altar, would blow the shofars. Uvayom hashvi'i, and on the 7th day, makivim oto sheva pamim. So when the temple was in existence, on the Sukkot, they would walk around it 7 times, and the Kohanim would blow shofars. Al dimyon shel hakafot hamizbeach lekibush Yericho. So we can compare the walking around of the altar to the conquering of Jericho. Efshar losif od. We can add one more thing. Hamizbeach shayu aravot zkufot zvivo. The altar, there was like a place inside the altar where they stuck the lula. Aravot are like the willows that they would, standing upright, they would stick inside of them. Domeh le'ir Yericho. They're similar to the city of Jericho, shayta choma sviva, because it had a wall around it. Hamizbeach va'korbanot, the altar and the sacrifices, shalashem kadosh lashem, domim le'ir Yericho. V'kol ma sheba sheyu charemla. Okay, but we don't need that one. Hakibush hanisi, this miraculous victory of Jericho. Why miraculous? Because they didn't have to fight. The walls just came tumbling down. This miraculous victory of Jericho, shaya lachar hakafat ha'ir, that came after the encircling of the city, misamel et hayeshua shemivakshim aleha. It signifies the salvation that we request, from the altar. Kshemakifim et hamizbeach. When you're sacrificing the altar, what are we saying? Ana Hashem hatzlichana. Please God grant us success. So when the Jews were encircling Jericho, what they were doing was they were saying psalms that said, please God grant us success in this endeavor. And so when we walk out of Yom Kippur and go into the sukkah, and holding the lulav, we're saying, grant us success, that our Yom Kippur went well, that I didn't fall asleep in the sermon, and that, by the way, people think we can't see who is. We can. It's the same 4 guys every year. And women. It's like, you think there's so many people that we don't see, we can see. All right. Aron Hashem shalach gamhu. The Ark of God also went around with them, around Jericho. Misamel shi Yeshua. Okay, and now here's what's really interesting. Misamel shi Yeshua tam shel Yisrael. It signifies that the salvation of Israel, higam Yeshua shel Hashem, is also the salvation of God. Now, remember the Hawaiian word, ani vaho, which means I and him, me and God. What's the salvation? The salvation is that the Jews and God are coming together. That's what happens in the sukkah. Now, the whole purpose of this is to say, in the last minute, the whole purpose of this to say is that we thought that Sukkot was a holiday. So we have 7 days of Sukkot. We have the lulav and the etrog. We now know specifically that the lulav, what it represents. I mean, there's lots of other midrashim, it represents this, it represents that. But really taking the lulav after Yom Kippur and walking into the sukkah with the etrog is saying that I had a good trial and I'm still here and God's going to protect me, and okay, fine, that's Sukkot. But we always thought that really the reason we have Sukkot is because God protected us in the wilderness. But if we had to have a sukkah to remind us that God protected us in the wilderness with Sukkot, why 7 days? Makes no sense. Do it one day. Do it for 40 years. Do it every day, because they lived in Sukkot all 40 years, the whole time. So why pick 7 days? And the answer is because the sukkah isn't really meant to remind us that they lived in sukkahs while they were in the wilderness. It does remind us that God protected them while they're in the wilderness, fine. But that protection was like Yom Kippur. If you make it through the wilderness, then you're going to get to go into your real sukkah. And the real sukkah is the land of Israel. That's where the fruit grows. That's where you're going to be able to do the lulav and etrog and do Sukkot the way you're supposed to. You can't do Sukkot the way you're supposed to in the wilderness because you don't have the lulav and the etrog. But what Sukkot really is, on top of all of that, it's the holiday that, now listen, because we always thought that it was how God protected us in the wilderness. And that's how I started. What's the tension here between the wilderness and the land of Israel? We always thought that this was a holiday that taught us about how God protected us in the wilderness. And now we find out with the 7 circlings and Yericho, the whole point of Sukkot is to show us that victory means conquering the land of Israel. Conquering the land of Israel. Now, what do I mean by that? That's the whole point with Yericho. Every year that the Jews, so let me just go back to the Leviticus Rabbah. Every year the Jews go on trial. Look what it says. This came before the judge. So if you look at the third line, so Israel and the nations of the world litigate before the Holy One, blessed be He, on Rosh Hashanah, and we do not know who prevailed. What are they litigating? They're litigating who gets the land of Israel. If we were good that year, we get to keep it. If we weren't, we get kicked out. And that's what goes on. So when you go so there were 2 years that we lost that trial. 586 BCE and 70 CE. On those years, we lost the trial and got kicked out. And the other nations of the world took the land of Israel back. And then for 2,000 years, there was no trial. In 1948, the trial started again. And every year since, we've won. And ironically, so Sukkot is basically saying we rent the land of Israel from God. And every year, we go back to see if our lease is renewed. And the way that our lease is renewed is if we earn it on Yom Kippur. And if we earn it on Yom Kippur, then we'll walk out into the sukkah with the lulav and God say, you've got it for another year. And so it's ironic then, in the days that we live in, that, hang on one second, that the war of October 7th started once Sukkot was over on Simchat Torah, but that the deal to free the hostages came down on Sukkot. And so there's some irony there. But in the final analysis, Sukkot isn't so much a holiday of how God protected us in the wilderness. It's a holiday of how God protects us in the land of Israel. That's what it's really all about. Okay, Chag Sameach.
Constructed for the whole peace thing, that it's going to be the Arabs that enforce security on the Gaza side, and on the Israel side, the U.S. will be there with Israel. So you better watch it.
Israel, and God forbid it hits an American soldier. That's it.
Exactly, and I think when Trump and Netanyahu were meeting, Trump said, listen, you can leave, that's what they want to do, we'll stay right there on this zone, and we'll stand with you. I think
You
it's
get the
easy.
Wall Street Journal.
I got it, I should.
There's yesterday's editorial was so well written about how, I don't know who else, the editorial wasn't in that day.
Right.
About Trump and how ingenious this whole thing was and how it was put together. I mean, it's an amazing summary of the brilliance of the whole, how this thing was put together, the strategy,
And God willing, then the hostages and as many bodies as they can find, I believe they did lose some. Anyway, get all of them back on Monday. Now you step out of line, all bets are off. Because you'll have given the hostages back. Oh, those poor people. Can you imagine?
let me tell you something. Hamas is not going to lay down this weapon.
But then, exactly. And you know what? The U.S. being there, number one, might be deterrent. But even if it's not, we're already there. We're, in place.
These 200 guys that they sent over are combat soldiers. They're 200, and they're more engineering and logistics. They're logistics guys. Soldiers. They're not combat soldiers.
But they should
They're
send.
logistics soldiers.
No, but listen, they should send logistics Marines. They could send the kitchen guys from the Marines. Because every Marine knows how to fight like an infantry.
Right. Which brings us back to this Netflix program called Boost. It's about Marine basic training. I mean, it's also about a gay guy going through basic training.
No, but I'm living it firsthand, kind of, and I feel privileged and honored to do so through my son. Yeah, he's a second lieutenant in the Marines, and he wants to be infantry. He said that their commanding officer over that's Marine Base Quantico. That's where Hegseth had his big thing. And Ethan said, our commanding officer over the Marines that are here, and we were on the other side of everything. We didn't mix up with the president. Told us not us, but said to the other branches, the Army and the Air Force and the Navy, welcome to the U.S. Marines. Because we never changed the way we did it. We always have that standard, and they do have to all work out. How old? 22. 22, yep. And really, they do teach them how to eat. They throw them out in the middle of nowhere to just do whatever it is they learn. And I can see them becoming an infantry officer, because that's what he wants to do. God help me. But anyway, when they graduated, when they first started to kick off everything, they said, you're going to find your young men and women different, blah, blah, blah. This was after OCS, Officer Candidate School. And then
both in the Army.
Oh, so yeah, but that was before the days when everyone dropped the bar, with all of this equity and blah, blah, blah. Because the only ones who didn't were the Marines. But in your days, Army was like the Marines, I'm sure. There are, but if they can't measure up, they're not going on the front line.
They have to pass
It's not to keep women out.
physical standards.
I have clients who work in the area of the defense where I live. They say since Hegseth has become the morale of the entire country has increased because Trump picked this guy from Fox News
like I say, once you always are. But, and thank you for your service, by the way. But anyway, you don't want to be standing next to an individual fighting.
He doesn't have your
Who's
back.
not going to be able to throw you over her shoulders and run 5 miles to get the hell out of there. I remember that woman.
That big, heavy set Secret Service money who couldn't even put her gun back in the holster. I mean, that was such an embarrassment.
Yeah. Ethan had even said to me, when all of this was happening, I'm so glad we didn't drop our standards, because I wouldn't be standing out there with some woman next to me who wouldn't be able to carry me. You got to be able to carry the guy next to you in case.
That's one of the first things we do in the first place. Is pick up somebody and put money back.
Exactly. So it doesn't feel weird. And they've already gassed us.
Instead of DEI, MEI. Merit, excellence, and intelligence.
There you go. There you go. You know they gassed them. They gassed them in the gas chamber.
We did that. We got that.
So they know what it feels like.
Although you'll see the way the Marines did it was a lot tougher than the way we did it. I missed it. They made them stay in longer.
1 minute.
You know, than we.
I got away with it.
We just took off our mask, took a breath, and ran out.
Oh, no, that's cheating. You can't do that.
No, in the Army, that's all they do. The Marines, if you watch this show Boots, forget that it's very pro-DEI. It really shows.
That's DEI.
Oh, that's another acronym, right. But you'll see what these how tough basic training is. I mean, we went through basic training, and we thought it was tough, but it's a walk in the park at the Marine.
You know what? We were talking to Ethan in the middle of the deal, and I think what they did was they were putting the flag up or something in the distance. I didn't even notice, and we're talking to him, and then like I'm talking to you, and he just was like, thinking it, and was like that. It called my attention. Yeah. Yeah. Well,
I
anyway,
still stand at attention when they do this sort of stuff.
I get up out of my couch even if it's before a game, and I stand there.
I was at a graduation last year, and they presented the flag, and then they went back, and everybody started sitting down. And I stood up, and I said to the people around me, the flag is still moving. Get out of here.